Okay, I think that it did it set it? I guess so. Okay, it looks like one. Does it show up on all the stuff? Hey guys, how's it going? Just wanted to tune in today for our Q and Ashley Q&A. I'll be answering any questions that you have. Um, had to change a little bit of the time because of sessions today, and I'll have to jump. I have a little more than half an hour today. Been trying to keep going in the same time frame. We're gonna really work at trying to keep it that way. I also thought maybe another idea too eventually might be to loop it to the back of the radio show as well. That might be an option on Saturdays to do a live Q&A. So that's also a question, but we will be working on that, figuring out what times work best. Maybe a good Monday night, maybe a good Monday evening show might be good. Just trying to figure out what makes sense. So anyway, we'll be playing around with the times. We'll be figuring it out, and I appreciate you having patience because I know that moving around all the time is definitely not convenient, but we're trying to figure it out and make it work. So if you have a thought about maybe another day that you think might be good or another evening, because I'm thinking, it would be great to stick with it and have it at the same time. So that's what we're going to work at. George is here in studio. Buddy is here as well. So all is good. So that's a good thing. So Buddy's actually laying here. He's very calm. He's been here and at the office all day through so many of my sessions today. He gets to come on video a little bit sometimes, which is good. So that's a fun thing, and that's a good thing. So we're happy about that, and all is good. So if y'all have some questions, let me know. In the meantime, let me see who's all tuned in. Good to see. Okay, let's see. Marina, great to see you. How are you doing? Thanks for reaching out today. I'm glad that you're here with us. Damien, great to see you. How are you doing? Glad that you have joined us today on the Q&A, so that'll be fun. It's good to have you here. Zen and me, great to see you. How are you doing? Great to see you always. Damien, OMG, so many of your videos have helped me immensely. Well, I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. And thanks for reaching out. It's interesting because, I try to put up as much content as possible and then as much content as I think that will connect. And so I appreciate that comment for sure. Thank you so much. Zenemy, hey, buddy. He's right there. He's laying down here. I'll pick him up toward the end for sure. Damien, do we just have a question? Yes, if you can ask through the chat, that would be great. And I will get to as many questions as possible here in our time today. So I'm glad that y'all tuned in. Kind of back-to-backs today. So it's been started at an early morning, and tomorrow will be pretty much the same. Working on Saturday as well. We got the radio show and working with clients as well on Saturday. I'm going to take Sunday off, though. And I'm happy about that. So I'm going to take Sunday off and kind of do a little bit of relaxing, but we'll see some, I don't know, probably take care of Buddy. I got to get him some food, do that kind of sort of thing. So yeah, so go on and ask any questions that you want. I'll start with just, I have a video. What's the video that we have coming out next? Do you remember? So we have a video coming out. It'll be up next week. And I can't remember right now. We just did it. Oh, yeah. I can't stop thinking about them after a breakup. Oh, yeah. So we have that coming up. We have the show on Saturday, which will be great. And, a lot of my ideas for the show, for the radio show, I've been on since 2012. So, a lot of the show ideas kind of come to me, the night before, sometimes the morning of, sometimes an hour before, you know how it is. And, concepting that and trying to, to put out subject matter information that really is necessary, that's necessary for knowledge, for understanding And so I think that's very powerful. There is something that, until we have some questions, I was going to bring up something that I thought was interesting. I've realized that in life, when we begin to work on programming and decoding that programming and working to realize where it began and how it all happens from there, we also in the process usually learn. We have to learn about other people's programming, and it's interesting because sometimes a lot of us are doing things on autopilot, right? We're doing things based on the past and how we were raised and all those great things. So once we begin to be aware of our programming and we begin to work to deconstruct that, it's like a daily process, right? It's a moment to moment, second to second process. And I've realized that as we're going through this process of being able to understand who we are and address who we are, many of us are in relationships currently, right? And so what we're going to be seeing too a lot of times when we work with this is we're going to also see the other person's programming in Technicolor. And we have to work to not get triggered by those things that have triggered us in the past. And one thing that I just want to say before I just start answering some questions is that one of us has to take the leadership role in the relationship. Okay. Once we see this stuff, we can't turn back. Once we see this stuff, we can't ignore it. Once we see this stuff, we have to continue to move forward, because if we don't, and we end up, and it's hard because it's easier said than done, right? It's easier said than done. Like, don't get triggered. But once we're able to understand and acknowledge why we're getting triggered, we can begin to stop those triggers, right? And then we have to work at being the leader, meaning that even though sometimes we want to get angry or upset or whatever, we have to work at really keeping that cool, really focusing on that learning and that knowledge, because right when we backtrack, the other person is going to see that as a way that they can break our boundaries and as a weakness, right? So not that they maybe always want to see it that way, or maybe it could be a subconscious scene of a weakness. And so that's something I just wanted to address real quick, because once we get to that point, once we know the truth, we can't go back, right? Marina, yes, I will answer questions for sure. She'll always answer. I appreciate that. Sin M, how can you make it easier to cope with actively realizing that your family has been abusing you and you thought it was normal? You were so caught up in the intermittent reinforcement, and that was life. So how can you make it easier? How can you make it easier to cope with with realizing that your family has been abusing you and you thought it was normal? That's a really good question. How do you deal with it, right? I mean, I think that, realization and truth is powerful, right? And so when we realize something and we come to grips with the reality that this has been going on, we can get a little angry about it, obviously. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for us to understand truly what was going on, what we were dealing with. And it also gives us introspection into why we are or how we feel right now. And I don't have like an easy pill, to say, hey, take this and you'll feel great. You'll be fine. But no, it's like when we realize this, I think it's two-ply, right? I think it's kind of bittersweet in the process. Sweet in the fact that we realize that some of the stuff, we finally account for some of the things we couldn't understand. We finally realize things that were going on that make sense. We finally connect the dots. But at the same point, how could our family do that? And I think that, stepping back a bit in this moment as well, is that stepping back and analyzing how we feel about the situation, who was involved, how we want to deal with it, how we want to forgive it, and how we're going to possibly move on is critical. And I find that a lot of times too, when you realize this, there's this epiphany and you start connecting the dots, you want to get answers from the people that abused you. And sometimes you can get answers, but other times, like I was saying before, when we're dealing with people who have this conditioned programming, it's like we're trying to get them to hear us, believe us, accept us, validate us. And in that process, we can come up short. And so the one thing that I want to say real quick for the record is that we need to step back in the situation and start really analyzing the abuse that took place, seeing it for what it is, connecting the dots. If you can do this on your own, that's great. if not working with somebody, is very practical. And being able to walk through that steadily, taking time for yourself. Okay, you don't have to jump right back into the family dynamic. You have to be very careful with that. And you have to have some emotional distance and create that emotional distance to safeguard yourself, not only for the healing process, for understanding, connecting the dots in the healing process, but eventually that, we have to decide, how you want to present this. If you want to communicate this, do you want to get it something out for the record, that sort of thing. But we want to do that in the timely manner in which we have a powerful stance. Okay, because we want to come back at, if we're going to communicate how we feel to this family later on down the road, we have to come from a stance of power. And that can only come from complete understanding, at least more understanding. And once we do that, we come from a really distinguished place. And also, we're not getting triggered, because the last thing we want to do is get abused by somebody, live our life thinking everything's hunky-dory, figure it out, right? Go to them to get them to apologize. They don't apologize. Maybe they even make us feel worse about it. And see, it's like a double-edged situation. So we want to make sure that we get that tightened up. And unfortunately, there is no way of making it easier. But the good thing about coping with it is that you begin to understand a lot of the reasons why things happened. You begin to realize the truth. And I think that can be kind of a freeing thing, if anything. Even though it's a painful process to go to, it can be freeing. Oscar, how do you stand up to somebody for yourself against the narcissist manipulation, mainly when they use your child as a weapon? That's challenging. How to stand up to someone against the narcissist, because manipulation is tough enough, especially when it's with the mother of your child, and especially when they're using the child as a weapon, right? Or the child is leverage. I'm wondering if that's also happening, right? The child is being used as leverage against you. And that's hard, because it's hard to stand up to them, because they can say that you're not going to see the child. They can try to take the child away from you. And so that can be a very challenging place to be. Unfortunately, what I've found is that, legal wise, when we go into a legal situation and mandate how often we're going to see the child, that can safeguard the situation so that we have connection with our child. But in the process, it's hard, because we can stand up only so much to when they use that. And I'm not sure how long this has been going on, but if she's using this and saying that you can't see the child, and she's using this against you, it's very hard, because if you love the child, you want to do anything you can to see the child. And unfortunately, in the control power play that she's rolling, she knows that. And so that's, hi buddy. So that's definitely a situation that is really challenging, and you have to kind of work with kid gloves on that one. But if there's a way to legally, draw up some legal agreements on that child, and how that, as far as like how often you see the child and that sort of thing, that would be best, because it's hard, because when you're dealing with someone like that, they can change the rules at any moment. And by the way, they created the game, right? So, I mean, that's my thoughts on that. I hope that helps a little bit, because sometimes we have to get somebody else involved, or or the state involved, or whatever we have to do. But in the process, I think that I would also bring up to the fact of, hey, this is our child, and, this hurts my feelings when you do that. But again, you might have already done that, and she already knows that. And so it's a control factor. Okay, Damien, questions I believe were hit. Okay, questions asked that I believe were hidden insults. Do you feel like you are a good boyfriend? Oh, that's interesting. It could be insulting. It can also be gaslighting. It can also be a form, obviously gaslighting is a form of manipulation, but do you feel, I think that's an interesting question. Do you feel that you are a good boyfriend? To me, that's latent with issue, right? I mean, do you feel like you're a good boyfriend? Be like, really? Huh. Yeah, I actually do. What are you trying to get at? Yeah, I do. I mean, I guess my response would be like, yeah, I do feel like yeah, I'm great. I'm great. Be interesting to see what the comeback was on that because see, it's making you question your validity, right? So a question like that is, do you think you're a good student? If a teacher was to ask that, do you really think you're a good student? I mean, that's a question that's made to ask, made to go within you to ask, am I? Is there something wrong with me? Yeah, definitely. And the second one, do you think that you nurture this relationship? Again, interesting question. Um, and I feel again that this is supposed to put you on, it's supposed to put you there to ask that question. It's supposed to make you introspective. It's supposed to make you question, are you nurturing this relationship? Are you a good boyfriend? And, if you're dealing with this on a constant basis, I feel like, I think eventually that has to be called out. And I don't agree with, flipping the script. Do you think you're a good girlfriend? I mean, do you think that you're nurturing this relationship? But at the same time, I find that when we get called on the carpet like that, we have a tendency of sitting in the position of self-defense. And when we sit in that place of self-defense, trying to defend ourselves, trying to defend who we are, trying to defend our value, sadly enough, we play the defense the whole time. Okay, we never get to go on offense. Okay, and so sometimes we have to look at it and realize that some people will never accept what we say. Some people are never going to understand where we come from, and some people are never going to see our value in what we bring to a relationship. And I guess one of the things in a non-antagonizing way that I would bring up is, if we don't, hey, I'm, if you're happy to be in the relationship, whatever, I'm glad to be in this relationship. But if you don't see my value, I mean, I don't really know what we have here. I'm bringing 100% to this relationship. If you don't see that value and you don't see the value in me, that's fine. I mean, because I've realized with some people, they're never going to see our value, and that's okay. That just means that that's not really a supposed to be. Right? Because there's going to be a lot of people out there that see our value. There's going to be a lot of people out there that don't see our value. So how do you monitor your time? You have to actually specifically pick people that actually respect you and see your value, and vice versa, because we don't have time to meet with everybody, right? You don't have enough time to meet and go on dates with every single person on the planet, and you kind of be able to figure it out pretty quickly. But some of these relationships may be quicker than others. And I would just, if you don't, let me know. First off, if you don't feel like I am, what do you think that I'm not doing? Is a good question. But also realizing, how often are you on the defensive with this relationship? How often are you having to prove yourself to this person? And that might open your eyes to something, possibly. Zen and me. How do you start trusting others after narcissistic abuse? I feel like I analyze everyone as to whether they are being true and honest. I may be causing damage to future relationships. Yes. And that's important, because we have to, my thing is this, is that there was a point a long time ago where I lost a little bit of trust. But then I realized that me going into relationships not trusting was I needed to kind of switch the equation, right? I needed to go into the relationship trusting the person until they give me reasons not to trust them. Okay, so I look at it as, hey, I'm meeting this person, they're this way, whatever, this is great. I'm going to trust them until I'm given reason not to. And especially multiple red flags, right? I mean, everybody can make mistakes. Everybody can make mistakes. We're human. I mean, we're on this planet. We're doing this human experience. But I feel that when we are untrusting, people that are actually, now this is going to happen on both sides. When we are untrusting and there's somebody that's not trustworthy, they're going to beat us down for, not trusting them. But, on the other side of the equation, some really trustworthy people could be, upset or, or kind of like tired of trying to defend themselves, because they don't feel like they need to, because they're doing the right thing. And I've been on that side of the equation, where, I've had friends that had been taken advantage of multiple times, been with folks that took advantage of them, lied to them, cheated on them. And then when we were friends, it was hard for them to accept my truth. And after a while, it became painful because they were so questioning. And we're friends now, but I had to take a step back, and they had to kind of go through their process of not trusting people because they had been through so many people that they didn't trust. But I couldn't take that type of situation anymore because it wasn't healthy for me to be around. So it's like we have to find that sweet spot. And what I found is that it can be hard, but if you can trust somebody in the beginning as you meet them, obviously not putting like like being aware of how much trust you're giving and being aware of what you're telling the person, but at the same time, not being so just on edge on red flags, but being aware of the red flags. And when you catch a red flag, one of the things that I do is, instead of sweeping under the rug, I'll bring it up. I'll bring it up because at least I owe it to myself to acknowledge if I'm right. And I also owe it to the situation that I don't want to, throw away a friendship based on maybe a misunderstanding. But I also don't want to continue down the pathway of dealing with somebody who is lying or cheating or narcissistic in the process. And so, and sometimes when you call out a situation and you're calling out the truth, usually they're going to take off. And so there's not a lot of wasted time as well. I hope that's helped, because sometimes it can be hard, but sometimes we can lose some great people in the process because, they almost give up because they don't know how to break that distrust that you have from past relationships. Okay, so Sim M, but how do you trust that you even know what is normal and is so confused when going into new relationships because for so long you were blind? What if you were still blind and don't know? Okay, also real quick, love the question, but I don't ever use the word normal. There is no normal. All we have is we have healthy and unhealthy relationships, right? So that's one of the things, is we got to figure out what's healthy and understand what's healthy and what's unhealthy. And so even if you were blind for a while, there's a way of being able to catch and understand when something is unhealthy, right? There's a way of understanding when something feels unhealthy. And I think that we have to be aware of the fearful, the normal, because to me, normal is the way we were raised. So no matter how positive or negative the way we were raised is, that becomes our normal. That's where we have the blind spots. And so, yes, even if you didn't know what you were dealing with for a while and now you're kind of coming to terms with that, that's great. But then we have to really work on you. And that's how we get better at understanding. It's not about, it's good to be able to understand cluster B. It's good to understand, BPD. It's good to understand MPD. It's good to understand these different types of things. And that's great. And we get the knowledge we need to connect the dots with a previous relationship, understand the situation. But take it a step further. We have to really understand who you are, what you want, what your values are, how those values exist in your life. And we continue down that road to work on the detachment of the programming. And while we get to that point, all of a sudden, that's when the light comes off, because it doesn't matter about what symptom goes with that or this. It's okay. This is a healthy, this feels healthy because of these reasons, or this doesn't feel very healthy to me because this feels like I'm picking up on some red flags. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling as though I can't present my thoughts. I don't feel like I can actually express my emotions. And so those are the things that I think really can come into play here when we think about that, because maybe we felt like we were blind before, but as we continue to open our eyes and acknowledge the situation, we have to also open our eyes and acknowledge how we feel, because once we get really right with ourselves, we can feel immediately when a situation is really healthy, and we can feel immediately when a situation isn't. Cower. Yeah, overanalyzing creates so many problems. Yes, it can. It can, because we can get stuck in the mind. We can get stuck in the mind. And that's And that's something we have to be aware of, is that we can analyze the situation, but if we over and over and over analyze, we can lose the entire concept. Because remember, the brain is fixated on solving a problem, right? And a lot of times all we need to do is get out of our mind and get into the mindful mind of being in the moment to be able to put things into perspective. A lot of times we're over analyzing a situation. Let's see here. Zen and me. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Sin M, can you talk about narcissists as a parent? Yes, there's a lot of folks out there, unfortunately, who are narcissistic parents. I mean, the fact is that many of us were raised by people that had narcissistic tendencies, and that's something that when we're dealing with that. And it's interesting. You said, I think you're talking about like covert narcissists, to some degree, and even an introverted narcissist to some degree, can be sensitive to that criticism, can be very dismissive. When we're raised by parents that are narcissists, it can be problematic because remember that changes our dynamic for our attachment style. Our attachment style is really determined within like the first 2 years of our life. And when we're dealing with that, with somebody is, really, within themselves, very self-centered, very withdrawn, very into themselves, very sensitive of criticism, very dismissive. Those are signs, that are very tough. If you're dealing with a covert narcissist, for example, they're extremely sensitive to criticism. They have passive aggressive behavior. They display passive aggressive behavior. They, and those are some tendencies that, they might be depressed. They might be envious. They might hold grudges. And if you are a child of that situation, you got the brunt of that situation, coming out of that will create issue too, because remember, we have to analyze that type of programming because we might have a tendency because of the blind spots that we had being raised that maybe, dealing with a cluster B, maybe there would be a blind spot because they appear differently. We get into that relationship because it feels what? That's when we use the word normal, or when I would use the word normal. Damien, OMG, exactly. Totally invalidated me and all that I bring to the table. Exactly. Oscar, yes, as leverage against me and my family. I've seen it horribly a lot of times, and it's so painful. Damien, yes, twice a month. Marina, well said. Thank you. Victoria, I realized my whole life is filled with narcissists. I am in therapy to overcome this pattern, but how would I stand up to people that hang up on you and all of them bring up the other lies? So how would I stand up to people that hang up on you and all of them bring up the others' lies? I struggle with standing up for myself because I know I am being honest and sometimes think they will see the truth, but this is not always true. See, the thing is that we have to be careful. We got to pick our battles. Okay. And some people are just not worth it. Just not worth it. They're just not. You know what I mean? I'd sit there and say, I'd love to sit there and say, yeah, let's tell every single narcissist in our background, in our past, and be able to call them out. And I would love to be on that. That'd be great. I'll do this. We'll have a big, worldwide meetup. We'll all call out our narcissists and we'll have somebody. But the problem is that, there's a tendency that they're not going to even listen, even hang up on you, even blame you, even lie, even continue the lies of someone else. And what I found is that it perpetuates the problem because you've already been beaten down by the situation. You've already had pain in your life by it. We have to be careful how much more that we're going to allow this other person to impact us. And so I've realized that, in these situations, sometimes it's good to call it out, say it, but don't expect them to see your point. Don't expect them to agree with it. Because remember, they're going to hide behind the veil of being the victim. They're going to hide behind the fact that you did something. And see, that's the way that they get away with it. That's the way that they mentally and emotionally get away with it, is you did it. It was your fault. It was your problem. Okay. And so when they're still acting from that position or other people are protecting them from that position, that's when we need to step back and say, okay, knowing the situation in hand, how much do I want to play with that? And how much of it really is what I want to do, because I am valuable. See, we have to be careful because each time we go back into this game that they've perpetuated and we get beaten up emotionally or mentally, we go through pain. And that makes us question our reality because it hurt us to begin with. We're re-questioning, which also does a number on our subconscious and does a number on our self-worth and self-value. Okay, so we have to really protect ourselves. I mean, we've gotten hurt by somebody before. We got to be careful letting them back in. And we got to be careful telling them how we really feel, because do they deserve to really know how we really feel? Do they really deserve how we really feel? And that's a good question, because I don't, I'm really thoughtful about who I really share my feelings with. Think about it. Because you have a lot of folks out there who have these tendencies, and they're going to use it against you. They're going to use it to manipulate you. They're going to use it to make you feel bad. And why give them any of that leverage? Even though they might have hurt you, we might have to get closure within ourselves, be prepared with that, and then limit our exposure to these people. Some of them you might want to call out. I get it. I understand. But we got to look at it from that framework a little bit. Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Huge fan of yours. Ashley, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate you tuning in this evening. Let's see. Marina, I think if you're on this channel, you'll have the narc radar forever. That's true. That's so true. I got a few more minutes. It's been a short show today, or short Q&A today. Because I have a client here in a couple of minutes, and I said I was going to be running late by 10 minutes. So let's see. Victoria, how do you stand up for yourself when narcissistic people gang up on you and back up each other's lies? If you do get the truth out there, they change the narrative and back each other up. See, and that's a losing proposition. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if you already know the truth and you've stood up for yourself, to me, that's it. That's it. I mean, they're going to play these games because they cannot deal with the truth. Okay, now some of it is subconscious, some of it's fully conscious. But to me, it's like trying to prove anything to these people. It's just not even worth it. You know, and I know it just isn't in the grand scheme of things. You know what I'm saying? Because they've already been a naysayer anyway. They've already put you down anyway. They're already creating this false narrative anyway. They're going to back up the false narrative because they have to, because the false narrative is their truth, because it's their safe truth. And so what you're going to have is you're going to have people defending at all costs this false narrative. And the only way that works is to defend their lies and put you down. And especially when there's multiple people involved, you got to safeguard yourself. I know that we want to get back at some of these people and tell them how we feel, and that's fine, and I'm totally for that, but there comes a time when we have to step back and say, okay, I've said my piece, I got to safeguard myself and move away from this situation. Okay, because they're not changing, they're not getting any better, they're not focusing on themselves, they're not working on the programming. Okay, Abby Normal, I dated her many times, love that. One of my favorite films of all time. Oh my gosh. Gene Wilder was in that. Did you get, what is it, Abby Normal? An Abby Normal brain? I love that. That was great. What was the name of that film? I can't remember it. Was it something, Carrie Garr in it? I think it had Carrie Garr. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the film. Now I have to look it up. Let's see, who was it? Let's see, Young Frankenstein. Yeah, I remember seeing that, Young Frankenstein with Gene Wilder in it. That was great. And that guy from Everybody Loves Raymond, remember the father? Victoria, when do you call it quits in a toxic relationship? You know, to me, that's a loaded question, but I love your question, Victoria, but there's multiple levels on here, especially like in a friendship or work. We have to look at it from different perspectives. Work is interesting. If it's a boss, we have to look at it from a pay situation, from a security situation. What do we have to deal with? How much time do we have to go look for another job, and what do we do? If it's not a boss, it's a work situation separate from that. How much longer do you want to be around? It's hard though when you're at work because you're surrounded by the situation, right? So that's something that is important to really take into consideration. And it can have other, financial security up, things surrounding that. So that's obviously, something that you really, really want to think about. As far as a friendship or a love relationship, to me, those types of things we can switch, and those types of things even easier. And it depends. It's like, how much toxicity do you want? How much of being unable to communicate? How much of being unable to communicate your emotions? How often do you feel, beaten down lesser than by being around them. And it's like, overall, it comes to a head at some point. And most people know, because we have to go back in and out of it a lot of times. For some of us, we have to try it over and over again before we realize that we're more valuable than this. But sometimes we haven't had enough pain yet, and I think there's always a threshold of pain that we hit. And once we hit that threshold, we don't want to go back. And so, and I know that sounds odd too, but what I've realized is that we have to experience enough toxicity where the pain is at a certain level that we say, okay, I'm not going to keep accepting this reality anymore. And that's when it's time to exit stage right, I believe. Naz, great to see you. Thank you for tuning in today. I really appreciate you. Victoria, I'm going to answer one more question. Just real quick. Let's see. Let's see here. Oh, I love that. Damien, my favorite new term I've learned is false narrative. You're welcome. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley. False narrative. Yes. And that's the key. A false narrative is, that's what people are telling themselves left and right now. Think about it. False narratives. Okay, and that's what they keep perpetuating, a false narrative, right? And even if they have to make you out to be the ass or the jerk or the liar or whatever it is to create that false narrative or to continue that false narrative. One thing I do want to say about the false narrative real quick. When somebody is attacking us or going after us, we have to be very careful, because when that happens, if we get triggered to respond back in an angry way or a yelling way or whatever, and just a really mad and angry way, what we're doing is we're validating their narrative. Okay, we're validating the narrative as truth. And I mean that because they've already created this reality that there's something wrong with us, that we've created the problem, or we're part of the problem, or we are the problem. And so when we do that, so we have to be very careful in being triggered, because the false narrative can cause us, when we're triggered by the false narrative, it can cause them to continue with the situation, to continue to badger us, and to believe that whatever they're saying is truth. Marina, you've put many pieces of the puzzle together. Let's see. Once again, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. Victoria CP, I couldn't move because I had family obligation, but it looks like I'm moving toward a brand new life. That's a good thing. That's perfect. And, last but not least, it looks like there's one last question that I'll answer tonight, and then we will be back on Saturday for the radio show at 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. Let's see. Last but not least, is it okay to walk away from someone who has an anxious attachment style? I know I am secure, but she believes I'm avoidant, but I am just utterly exhausted, drained, and beaten up emotionally. Yes. Yes, it is. And I mean, if you've given the reasons and you've told why and you've explained and you've worked at it, yes. I mean, we have to realize that we want to help other people in our life and we want to be there for people. But there comes a time where we have to realize we got to live this life we have. And what I've realized is that if you're being beaten down and you're not being heard and the pain is real and you're emotionally and mentally exhausted every day, you're not going to be able to help anybody. Okay. And I figure that when we get to that level of mental exhaustion from a relationship, it means that we're speaking a different language and we're speaking two different programs. That's what's happening. She's speaking her program. You're in your situation. And until we start breaking that down, but usually what it takes is both of us to step back, do the work on our own, and see where that leads. Because I've realized that most of us are on autopilot, and if we just keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, we're just kicking the can down the road, causing more pain and suffering. Heck yeah, I worked. I went to couples counseling and everything. Nothing's changed. I get it. And, and that's sometimes we have to look at it and say, okay, it is what it is. We've tried something. We tried here. You're not a failure. Okay. And that's something that I want to leave on today's show, on today's Q and Ashley, real quick. If you have a relationship where it didn't work, you're not a failure. Don't judge yourself based on that. If you have to leave a relationship because it is toxic, because it is unhealthy, because you cannot get your emotions, you cannot talk about your emotions, you cannot communicate, you're basically what you're doing. And I think that it needs to be spoken about, talked about, and ended in a proper way. But you're actually working, you're stepping back and you begin to work on yourself and work on what you need to work on. That is not failure. That is success. Okay. That is absolute success. But I want you to think about that, because some people are so scared to leave a relationship because they feel like it's failure. But sometimes when something doesn't work, it actually is successful in the fact that it doesn't work. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Okay, check us out on Saturday. Damien, you are so welcome. I totally appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley. You're truly an angel. I so appreciate you. Thank you so much. Yeah, tune in on Saturday. I'll be around, and I look forward to seeing y'all. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to do the show this Saturday. I think I have a bunch of clients back and forth on that, but we're going to figure out exactly. Let's talk about some times for the next following weeks for the Q&A. And maybe what we'll do is we'll kind of move it around and see what everybody likes. Maybe a Monday night's better for y'all. Maybe a Wednesday or something like that. Let's think about it. So if you have some thoughts on that, please let me know. Thank you for tuning in. You are totally cared about. And you know what? I just glad that you tune in. Zen and me, you're always so helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. And just if you have any questions or if you'd like to contact me directly, just go to ashleyburgess.com. Just click on that contact page and you can just send me an email. You just go down, kind of scroll down to the bottom. You can send me an email and I'll respond back. Give me 48 hours, but I always respond back and I love to hear from you. Daryl, thank you so much. Great. Thank you for tuning in. Y'all are amazing. Have a great night. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to live your true life.